Kia ora, tēnā tautau katoa, atamaria everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the recent legislative changes relating to overseas building products. It's really fantastic to see so many familiar faces here, and a really warm welcome to those of you joining us for the first time. We've had an incredible response with over 1,000 registrations for this webinar, and because of that, this is our second session to make sure that everybody has a chance to participate. And I understand there are a couple of you who are probably on here for the second time, so really cool to see all of those keen people. Today is a really great opportunity for us to connect with you. You're our key stakeholders and co-regulators, and this is to provide early awareness of the 3 important new pathways for building products. These are part of the government's broader efforts to strengthen the building and construction system. Ko Clare Botha, tōku ingoa. I'm Clare Botha, Principal Advisor in the Building System Delivery and Insurance team here at MBIE. Just before we dive in, a few housekeeping notes. You're more than welcome to ask questions at any time using the Q&A function. That said, our speakers will be walking through each of the pathways and what they mean for you, so you might find it helpful to hold your questions until the dedicated Q&A session at the end. But don't worry, if something comes to mind during the presentation, feel free to pop it into the Q&A box whenever it suits you. Behind the scenes, we've got Susanna Tolman from Building Policy and Devin Glennie from Building Performance Engineering ready to answer your questions in real time. We'll also answer a few questions live at the end of the session, and please be aware that if we don't get to yours today, rest assured we'll follow up with you afterwards. Each question helps us understand what information and support you need, so nothing goes to waste. And just for your awareness, we will be recording this webinar for internal quality assurance purposes. I'll be your host today, and I'll be guiding you through the session and introducing our speakers. Now that the Building Overseas Building Product Standards and Certification Schemes Amendment Act, which just rolls off the tongue, has passed and is officially part of the Building Act, MBIE has been working on the details of the 3 new pathways to help recognise quality overseas building products here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Here's a brief timeline of how we got here. You can see starting with the announcement in April 2024, followed by consultation, the introduction of legislation to Parliament, the Select Committee process, and now the passing of the legislation in April of this year. Each of our speakers will take you through what's next for each of these pathways. We've got a really great lineup of knowledgeable speakers to walk you through each of these. So first up, we have Katie Symons, Principal Advisor Engineering in the Building Performance Engineering team. And she'll introduce the new legislative instrument that is the Building Product Specifications, or BPS. And this enables MBIE to streamline the citation of international building products, standards, and specifications. She'll also explain how you can provide feedback on this new pathway. Next, we'll have Amanda Macauley, Principal Advisor in the System Performance and Implementation team. And she'll talk you through MBIE's recognition of overseas certified building products, what our planned approach is and criteria, and how you can help us identify the types of products we should be focusing on. And then finally, we'll have Lisa Sophane, Technical Lead in BSDA, and she'll cover the Minister-endorsed standards and standard certification schemes and how to assess them and what they mean for the sector. So let's get into it. First up, we have Katie Symons, Principal Advisor Engineering in the Building Performance Engineering team, and she'll introduce the new legislative instrument. Take it away, Katie.
Thanks very much, Claire. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'm going to walk you through the building product specifications, which, as Claire's mentioned, is our new regulatory instrument. And it's, in fact, the first of the 3 pathways that's going to come into effect. So we'll kick off about this. So what is the building product specifications in relation to our existing regulatory framework, which we like to display as our trusty triangle with the Building Act at the top and the Building Code forming the legislative instruments we have. Underneath that, we have compliance pathways, verification methods and acceptable solutions that everyone knows and loves. And these building product specifications sit alongside those AS and VM documents that they're going to work together. So the purpose of the building product specifications, or the BPS as we like to call it, is where it's the place where we're going to house or cite product specifications and product standards, some of which are currently cited in our acceptable solutions and verification methods compliance pathway documents. So we're going to move product information from those documents into the building product specifications. Alongside those standards that we already cite, we're going to cite additional overseas product standards, but only if we've assessed that they require equivalent or better performance than the ones we currently cite, because we're not looking to change any performance requirements of the building code. And when that section of the BPS is referenced by the acceptable solutions or verification methods, the content of that part of the BPS relating to what the products need to do and how they need to be specified then becomes part of that acceptable solution or verification method and can be used to demonstrate compliance with that particular building code clause. Sorry. So another important aspect of the building product specifications as an instrument is that we've developed a streamlined update process for that document, because the policy intent of the document is to provide more compliance options and not to change performance requirements. When we update that document, we will be consulting, but we will only be consulting on and asking for feedback on the material that we're proposing to incorporate by reference, which basically means cite within that document. So we're asking people to confirm whether the standards that we're proposing to cite are appropriate. Do they require equivalent, if not better, performance than current requirements? This means that we won't be carrying out an options analysis or that impact assessment that we do when we update acceptable solutions and verification methods. And so the consultation periods when we do update the BPS will be shorter than you might be used to for previous building code update consultations when we've updated those AS and VM documents. So what does the building product specification look like? Well, that is a picture of the front cover in its draft form. And the structure of it, what we've tried to do is, as you can see, we've tried to align the contents and how it's structured with how products are specified in building projects in New Zealand today. So we've based the sort of framework of it on the Coordinated Building Information, or the CBI classification system. So breaking building products down into their sort of system, structure, enclosure, interior, finishes, services, and then we have added fire characteristics of building products at the end. And the purpose of this is it avoids product information being spread across multiple acceptable solution and verification method documents, of which there are many, and it's sort of quite confusing and quite hard to find out what each product needs to do. So the idea is to put it all in one place in the building product specifications. Because in those building code documents, our acceptable solution and verification methods, we've got a lot of standards cited. So the current state, so before the introduction of the building product specifications, we've got over 450 standards cited. Of those, over 250 are specifically building product standards. And within MB, we did a sort of internal analysis and we identified that of those more than 250 standards, 140 of them were actually the only option for demonstrating compliance of that type of product. So what we've tried to do with the building product specification is introduce, in this new document, in the first version of it, we've got over 120 product standards cited, and of those, nearly all of them, over 90%, are overseas product standards or joint Australia-New Zealand product standards. So a lot of them non-New Zealand standards. And approximately half of the standards that we're citing in the first version are in fact new or updated standard citations. So they're not ones that we've moved from acceptable solutions or verification methods. They're ones that we've added to provide those additional options for demonstrating compliance. Right. Just to kind of reiterate the point about the difference between the BPS and ASVMs, because they both the documents set requirements that you need to meet in order to demonstrate compliance with the building code. The BPS houses information about how the product itself must be specified. So things about how the product needs to be tested or fabricated, or even physical properties of the product itself. The acceptable solution and verification method documents still have the requirements of how that product must be used in building work that is going to be that needs to demonstrate compliance with the building code. And the requirements in those acceptable solution and verification methods haven't changed and won't change with the introduction of the building product specifications. So what's in the draft first edition? And it is a draft because it's currently out for public consultation. We're looking for feedback. It contains, this first edition contains information, specifications and standards for the following types of building products. So concrete, steel, timber, cladding, windows, plasterboard. And there's a sort of caveat there that it's properties of plasterboard as in relation to how it's used as a bracing element in timber frame construction only, as well as insulation, heating, ventilation and air conditioning, plant and equipment, and then fire characteristics of products, which could apply to any type of building product. So it's really important to note that this first edition that we're consulting on at the moment is not fully comprehensive. It doesn't contain all building products used in New Zealand today. And of the products it doesn't cover all aspects of that product performance. You know, for instance, plasterboard we know contributes to a number of different performance requirements for building work. But yeah, we're only covering one in this first edition. So some product requirements do still remain in the acceptable solution and verification methods documents. And the idea is over time, we'll be moving more of the product information into the BPS. So it is a sort of single source for product information and specifications. But then, of course, there will always be additional requirements for products that sit outside the building code that are needed to comply with other regulations such as health and safety. So that's not changing with the introduction of the BPS either. This is just about building code compliance. And just to run through a little example of how compliance pathways might be changed or expanded via the BPS when it's introduced. So we're looking at fibre cement cladding products. So currently, if you want to demonstrate compliance for building work which uses fibre cement cladding, you need to demonstrate how it complies with E2AS1. E2AS1 currently contains a clause that says fibre cement cladding must comply with AS NZS 2908.2. So you have a fibre cement cladding product. If it complies with that standard, you're deemed to comply with E2AS1. But that's the only way you can demonstrate compliance via this pathway. After the introduction of the BPS, what we've done is we have a proposed clause in the building product specifications that says fibre cement cladding products can comply with AS NZS 2908.2, so the current standard, but also additionally an ISO standard and a European standard. So if you have a fibre cement cladding product that complies with either of those standards, you will be compliant with the building product specifications, and then E2AS1 in turn cites that section of the building product specifications. So that part of the building product specifications becomes part of E2AS1. Therefore, you've got multiple product standard options that are part of that deemed to comply pathway. Because it's really important just to kind of go back to the point that the building product specifications, it's not a deeming instrument, and by that we mean it cannot be used in isolation to demonstrate compliance with the building code. So it's only when an acceptable solution or verification method references the BPS that the content of the BPS can be used to contribute to building code compliance. So in that example just gave, if you had a fibre cement cladding product, just because it complies with the ISO standard or maybe the European standard, you still have to use it in such a way within the scope and the limitations of what E2AS1 says. So you still have to have some. You still have to comply with the acceptable solution. It's not just because you've got a product that is made or conforms to that product standard. That's not. You still have to comply with the acceptable solution. And also just to note that as we're updating our acceptable solutions and verification methods to include a reference to the BPS where appropriate, we're also taking the opportunity to improve those documents by making the format consistent. So we've got greater consistency across all building code clauses. We're making changes that improve the readability of those documents as well as the digital capabilities, so they can be more easily used on a screen or for machine reading capabilities. So yeah, that's probably a big change that you'll see when we come to update these documents. So just to finish by talking about the next steps. So yeah, as we've mentioned, we're currently in a consultation period. As we said, it's a shorter consultation period than you might be used to. It's only 3 weeks. It opened last week, but it's still open until 5 o'clock next Monday, the 23rd of June. So yep, that's your opportunity to input into this new instrument and give us feedback on the material that we're proposing to incorporate in the first version of the building product specifications. When we've taken on board your feedback, analysed it and made any necessary changes, we're looking to publish the building product specifications as well as those updated acceptable solutions and verification methods by the end of July. So quite a short turnaround. It's a streamlined pathway to making these updates. So these broader compliance options should be enforced by the end of July. And then following on from that, we'll be looking to develop proposals and more content to incorporate into the second version of the BPS. And we're really looking to engage with the sector to find out what would be the most useful parts of the BPS we can develop that would make significant changes to reduce regulatory barriers. So we'll be looking to do that as soon as we've published version 1, so from August 2025. So thanks, that's the update on the building product specifications. I'll hand back to Claire for the next pathway.
Amazing, thank you, Katie. Next up, we have Amanda Macauley, Principal Advisor in the System Performance and Implementation team, and she'll talk you through MBIE's recognition of overseas certified building products. Over to you, and kia ora, Amanda.
Kia ora Claire, and kia ora tātou to everybody here. It's great to see so many people who've come to both this webinar and the one yesterday. So thanks very much for giving us your time. I'm going to take you through the second pathway, which is the approved products certified overseas. And I just want to add a wee caveat before we start. So the regulations for this pathway are currently in development. We've already had a lot of really great detailed questions around this pathway and some of the specific products or standards that people have been asking questions about. We are working through a lot of that detail right now. So what I can give you today is an overview of this pathway, but we will be providing more detailed information before the regulations commence later this year, so don't worry. So the aim of this pathway is to make life a bit easier for manufacturers, suppliers, councils and consumers. So if an overseas product or building method has been certified overseas, instead of needing local certification for it to be a deemed to comply product or method, i.e. Code Mark New Zealand, a building product or method could be evaluated and recognised by MBIEs meeting local requirements, which can save some time and money in providing more options for the sector. So let's have a look at how this pathway will work. So under this approach, the Chief Executive of MBIE will have the authority to recognise building products or methods that have been certified by an overseas product certification scheme. Now, MBIE needs to first be satisfied that the products or methods meet specific criteria, which will be set in these upcoming regulations that I mentioned. So once recognised, these overseas certified products or methods will be deemed to comply with the New Zealand Building Code. And you can see on your screen now where this fits in our handy dandy building code triangle in orange, just under code mark. So what does this mean in practice? It means that building consent authorities must accept recognised products or methods as deemed to comply with the building code, just as they would with a code marked product currently, as long as that product obviously is used within the scope and limitations of the recognition and is supported by any relevant technical documentation. Now, each recognition notice will detail what New Zealand Building Code clauses apply to that product or method, and if there are any limitations or exclusions on the recognition. And we're also able to amend or revoke recognitions as needed. So let's walk through the process of how MBIE is going to evaluate overseas certified building products and methods. Now, this is going to be a two-step process. So the first step is actually evaluating the overseas product certification scheme itself. And then the second part will be assessing the specific overseas certified building products and methods. So first, looking at the robustness of the product certification scheme. There's a couple of key things that we'll be looking for here. One is that the certification scheme is accredited to a suitable international standard, and two, that it has strong, reliable processes in place. So when I talk about processes, what we're kind of looking for are things like processes for the thorough evaluation, assessment and certification of building products and methods, that there are ongoing monitoring processes to ensure that certifications remain valid and up to date, that there is a clear separation between certifiers and any product manufacturers, suppliers or testing facilities to ensure there's a high level of impartiality and independence, and that there are high standards of integrity and professionalism among the personnel running the scheme. So one way that a certification scheme might demonstrate that it meets these requirements is through accreditation to a suitable international standard like ISO 17065 for conformity assessment. Now, this international standard in particular ensures that certification bodies operate competently, consistently and impartially. That's just one example. There are other accreditation to other standards that may be suitable, and we will also look at other evidence around their robust processes that I've mentioned. So let's move on to the products themselves. This will be quite an in-depth evaluation process. So at this stage, MBIE would need to be confident there is credible, well-documented evidence showing that the certified product or method, when used as intended, will comply with or contribute to compliance with the New Zealand Building Code. So the kind of evidence that we'd be looking for primarily will be the product certificates attached to those products. Now, these product certificates will need to have technical detail on intended use and scope, any standards or scheme requirements they've been certified against, so we can determine how that product might comply with our building code. There will be other suitable supporting information such as technical specifications, appraisals or equivalency reports that might be useful. Any information provided under the Building Product Information Requirements, or BPIR as we like to say in MBIE, we do like our acronyms, that might also be relevant as well, and any other relevant documentation that we're able to access such as technical specifications and documents. Now, as part of this evaluation process, we will be using technical expertise in both the building typologies around international standards and testing protocols. So we'll be using both internal and external technical expertise to feed into the identification of the relevant New Zealand Building Code clauses that might apply, and to also identify any potential limitations or exclusions on a recognition. So what's the outcome of this process? Excuse me, frog in my throat. If the evaluation confirms that the product or method complies with or contributes to compliance with our building code, MBIE will issue a recognition notice for that building product. Now, the recognition notice, as I've mentioned, will specify the relevant New Zealand Building Code clauses that apply and any limitations or exclusions that apply to the recognition, for example, any specific use cases or installation requirements. Now, recognition notices will be secondary legislation. So this means that they will be published both in the New Zealand Gazette and on our MBIE website. And we're envisaging that we will be publishing a list with the required information around recognition and product certificates. So all users, so designers, specifiers, BCAs and LBPs can use that information and know how to use that product as intended. So I've provided a couple of examples of what this might look like at a high level. So for example, if we look at a Codemark Australia notice, you'll see with my amazingly accurate red line, on the current product certificates, it has the performance requirements and the deemed to satisfy provisions for the Australian Building Code. So what we would need to do for that kind of product is use technical expertise to look at the performance requirements that have been specified for the Australian environment and whether they meet or exceed at the performance requirements for New Zealand. And then identify, as I've mentioned, the building code clauses that may apply, and then that detail would be in a recognition notice for that product for New Zealand. Another example, again, look at my fabulous drawing of the red line there. That's excellent. This is an International Code Council's product certificate. These have already been, these equivalency reports essentially have already, they've already done the heavy lifting here and have done the assessment and have assess that this product already meets the New Zealand Building Code for clause G13 for foul water. So this might be perhaps an example of a simpler evaluation. So we would still obviously have to look at the International Code Council as a certification scheme and look at their processes first to make sure that the processes they use to actually assess and evaluate those products are robust, and then we'd also look at the product certificate and the associated documentation as well, but it would be likely then that the recognition notice would note that the product complies with G13 when used as intended. Another one, this is an example of a watermark product certificate, and it's likely that the watermark scheme will be one of the first schemes that MBIE will look at to recognise products. So as a lot of you know, in the plumbing and drainage world, a material or product intended for use in contact with drinking water in New Zealand must comply with AS NZS 4020, which is also the same as Part A of the National Building Code in Australia. So one of our steps in evaluating this product would be to see has this product been tested against AS NZ 4020, and if that's the case, then we could issue a recognition notice potentially for that product to say that it complies with G12 when used as intended. Another couple of criteria that will be set in the regulations will be to ensure that any certified building product or method has not been subject to warnings, bans or similar regulatory action, either here in New Zealand or in comparable overseas jurisdictions. And we'll also be looking to see how accessible and understandable the product information is for New Zealand users, well, exactly for the New Zealand environment. So this information again might come from, well, it will come from the product certificate and its equivalent documentation, installation instructions and manuals, BEPA declarations where appropriate. And just as a reminder, a BEPA declaration is for products that have already been imported into New Zealand, and any other technical documentation there as well. Now, we will be actively monitoring and reviewing recognitions over time, just to make sure that any changes to the product certificates themselves or certification scheme requirements, any changes or updates to international standards or testing protocols, just to make sure that those products are still suitable and they still meet the requirements of our building code. Just a quick note on liability, because we've already had lots of questions about liability. So for this pathway, BCAs will have liability protection when they've acted in good faith in reliance on a claim made by a manufacturer, importer, retailer or wholesaler for a recognised product or method. So this is the exact state of play as for a code mark product at the moment. I will also just note that Section 14G of the Building Act, the BEPA requirements for products imported into New Zealand and the Consumer Guarantees Act also apply to products. So aside from the BCA good faith liability protection, the settings are the same as they are now for any product that is currently being imported into New Zealand. So what's next? As I mentioned earlier, we're currently in the process of developing the regulations that will set the decision-making criteria for the recognition of overseas certified building products and methods. These are expected to commence by around September this year. Now, once the regulations have commenced, we'll work on starting evaluations for the first recognitions, and we're expecting to get the first lot done by the end of this year. Now, we're going to take a careful and considered approach to our first lot of evaluations, and we're looking to prioritise products from similar and familiar jurisdictions. So as I just mentioned before, one of the first schemes we expect to assess is the Australian Watermark Scheme for plumbing products, with the potential to recognise their certified products during our initial evaluation stage. Work is also underway to determine how further overseas certified products will be prioritised for recognition by MBIE, and this includes exploring a possible application process and developing some guidance for product suppliers and manufacturers. So just to quickly sum up this pathway, the recognition of overseas certified products is there to provide a robust way to show how an overseas building product or method meets the requirements of our building code. It's there to provide more choice of building code compliant products or methods and provide some consistency and certainty during the consenting process, since recognised products and methods must be accepted by all building consent authorities. So as Claire mentioned back at the start, we are really keen to get your feedback. We've already had some, and just keep it coming, honestly, guys. We'd be really interested to hear what products or methods you see that there is a bit of a gap in the sector, or we would like some more competition where there is opportunity. So please send in any of your feedback, and we can take that on board as we are developing and preparing to implement this pathway. Thanks, team, and I'll pass it back to Claire.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amanda. And finally, we have Lisa, Technical Lead Regulatory Services in the Building System Delivery and Assurance team, and she's here to introduce the Minister Endorsed Standards and Standard Certification Streams workstream. Thank you, Lisa. Kia ora.
Good morning. Kia ora, Lisa Clefane. I'm coming to you this morning from Upper Hutt. I have got a helicopter cruising around over the house, so if there's a little bit of background noise, I apologise for that. So as Claire said, I'm here to talk about the Minister's Endorsed Standards and Standard Certification Schemes. Now, I have also got the trusty triangle here this morning, and if we have a look at that, I've been allocated the colour purple here. So this initiative covers groups of standards that are issued by overseas standards organisations, and also standard certification schemes that a standard certification organisation administers or operates under. But it is important to note this is not a deemed to comply pathway, so it sits outside of that deemed to comply area. And so you can see down here, I've got a little purple strip there. So how is this going to be operationalised? So what is going to happen is very much like the pathway that Amanda was talking about. So the regulations will contain evaluation criteria that we can use to assess these overseas standards and overseas standards bodies. So that's currently being drafted at the moment. MBIE will have a role here. So MBIE will assess the groups of standards against those criteria, and we may use technical expertise where we need that from outside. We'll actually recommend then to the Minister which groups meet the criteria and therefore which ones can be endorsed. And the endorsed groups will be published on MBIE's Building Performance website and also notified in the Gazette. And like the pathway Amanda was talking about, we can also amend or revoke using that same publication and Gazette process. So what are the next steps? Well, as I said, waiting for the regulations to be drafted, and we're looking to see those commence in September. One of the questions a number of people have asked us, what standards organisations might you be looking at? So I've popped a couple of examples there. It doesn't mean we'll definitely be looking at those ones, but we've got the ASTM International there and also the CEN. Looking at the benefits of this pathway, while it doesn't provide a deemed to comply to the building code pathway, as I've already mentioned, it will indicate which overseas standards organisations are considered robust and trustworthy. So it may be considered by building consent authorities as information. And now I will hand back to Clare.
Great. Thank you, Lisa, so much. Right, before we get into some of the questions, I just wanted to note that in the chat, we've shared links to the BPS consultation and also 2 surveys that our good friends at EBOS have put together to help us capture insights to assist us with our implementation of these pathways, particularly the product certification space. One survey is for designers, builders and BCAs, and the other is for product suppliers and merchants. And both of those surveys are open at the moment. Right, let's move on to some of the questions on screen. Are some of the common questions that you've asked during the registration process for this webinar. And then we'll move to some of the live questions that have popped up within the Q&A. So, first question, is MBIE going to purchase standards for specifiers and BCAs to use for the BPS? And I'll hand to Katie to answer that question.
Yep, thanks, Claire. I'll take that one. And it is a question that we've been asked a number of times. So the introduction of the BPS doesn't change the status quo with respect to access to standards. So I'm sure people are aware that MBIE currently sponsors access to a number, I think over 100 New Zealand standards to make them more accessible. However, copyright issues do prevent us from doing that for any joint or overseas standards, and that hasn't changed with the introduction of the BPS. The BPS has been introduced to reduce a regulatory barrier and broaden the scope of products that can be used within a existing compliance pathway, those acceptable solutions and verification methods. But yeah, we're prevented from providing the same access like we can for New Zealand standards for those international or joint standards. And this is in line with the approach of other jurisdictions around the world. So it's not like something that we're doing, especially in New Zealand. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. Second question is, how do we know that product certificates MBIE has evaluated are suitable for New Zealand conditions? And we'll hand that one to Amanda.
Yeah, really good question. So this is about that second part of the evaluation process that I detailed earlier, and that's actually assessing the specific building product or method itself to ensure that it is suitable for New Zealand conditions. So we'll be looking to make sure that the performance requirements for that product meet or exceed our requirements here. And we will be taking into account our specific requirements. For example, whether a product or method meets requirements for UV, seismic or durability performance. So yeah, that's really important. I think that's all I can say about that. Yes, we will be assessing each product to make sure it is suitable for our conditions.
Awesome, Amanda. Thank you very much. Question about how have liability settings changed? And I'll pass that one to Suze to answer, I think.
Yeah, morena, everybody. So thanks for this question. I know it's one that's on everybody's mind. So I just wanted to start by recognising that, at least according to an EBOS report, over 90% of building products and building components currently used in New Zealand are already imported from overseas. So as part of this, existing obligations for product manufacturers or importers, including their liabilities and obligations around warranties and consumer guarantees, they do not change. The one change that we have made, as Amanda pointed out in her slides, is to amend the Building Act to provide a limited good faith liability protection for building consent authorities for products certified overseas that are recognised by MBIE. And that must be accepted by building consent authorities. So that's an extension of existing liability provisions that are in the Act. However, the bill doesn't remove building consent authorities' obligation to ensure that applications for building consents comply with the building code and that the building work is being carried out in accordance with the consent. So that's probably, that's it in a nutshell.
Great, thank you, Suze. And the last on screen questions are, how will these changes affect products that currently use an alternative solution pathway? And Katie will be answering that one.
Yeah, I can jump in here. It's a really good question. And in fact, we could just refer back to the example I gave about with respect to the building product specifications. So assuming we publish the building product specifications as our proposed version, the example I gave for fibre cement cladding products. So currently, if you have a fibre cement cladding product that is made in accordance with that ISO standard, because it's not cited in an acceptable solution or verification method, you have to use an alternative solution to demonstrate compliance if you've got a product made to that standard. But with the introduction of the building product specification as we're proposing it, because that ISO standard will be cited in the building product specifications and that will in turn will be cited in E2AS1, you won't have to use an alternative solution pathway if you've got the product made to that standard. So the idea is that we're broadening the options for products to become, so more of them will become part of a deemed to comply acceptable solution or verification method pathway. So that's kind of improving confidence for applicants, because of course the Building Consent Authority must accept building work as compliant with the building code if it follows one of those acceptable solution or verification method pathways. So I hope that's helpful for certainly how the BPS is intended to impact alternative solutions.
Great, thank you, Katie. And I'll get you to stay on screen because we've moved now to some of the live questions from the Q&A. So Gonzalo has asked about fire products and that have been certified overseas. How will MBIE's new pathway enable timely recognition of such products in New Zealand, particularly when equivalent to New Zealand standards do not yet exist?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And in terms of the building product specifications, I guess an important point to mention is this idea of making changes in a timely manner. That's why we've introduced the instrument, because we're intending to be able to update it more regularly so we can kind of keep pace with new product standards and specification instruments of information as it's developed overseas. In terms of when equivalent New Zealand standards do not exist, I mean, I guess we're looking at the performance level required by our acceptable solutions and verification methods. So if it's if there's an overseas standard that we deem to be appropriate and delivers the level of performance required, then we can consider it for citing in our in the building product specifications, which would then be cited in an acceptable solution or verification method. So yeah, I hope that helps with that question.
Great, thank you, Katie. And there's another one from Dean. So the aim is to have equivalent or better performance when the BPS cites an overseas standard. Are reports available showing the comparison for overseas standards in the draft BPS?
I guess when we update when we currently update acceptable solutions and verification methods, we do that through a consultation process. It'll be the same approach for the updates to the BPS. We'll be asking for feedback, and we'll be doing our own internal analysis on whether our proposals for the material that we're looking to cite or incorporate by reference are appropriate or not, and we'll be taking on board feedback from the consultation and the process for doing that.
Great, thank you, Katie. Amanda, we'll move on to some product certification questions, if that's okay. Amanda. Okay, so Fee has asked, what is the anticipated targeted timeline for product certificates to be recognised, and how many products are we looking to recognise as a starting point?
Yeah, really good question. Again, we're still working through exactly how long evaluation of products will take, as well as the evaluation of the scheme itself. But in terms of our first priorities, as mentioned, we'll be looking at the watermark scheme and finding, hopefully identifying as many of those products within that scheme that meet our building code performance requirements. So at the moment, there's about 200,000 products in the watermark scheme. I think there's about 2,500 product certificates that cover those products. I can't say that we're going to get to all of them before the end of the year, but that's going to be a priority. We'll also be looking as a priority any product certificates that have already had equivalency work done by overseas schemes to our building code requirements. So in my example, I mentioned the International Code Council equivalency reports. Anything similar like that will be a good, I guess, as I say, a measured, careful approach. So they will be our priorities before the end of the year, and looking to 2026, we'll still try and stay within familiar jurisdictions and not get too far ahead of ourselves. So looking closely at sort of our close neighbours such as Codemark Australia products. But what we need from the sector is some feedback around what products should we be targeting for recognition, where is the best benefit for New Zealand and the sector. And from that point on, we will be doing that targeted work. But as I said, we're also looking at potentially developing an application process for product manufacturers, suppliers and importers to actually apply directly to MB for us to then consider if we would evaluate their products for recognition. And we will be working on how we would prioritise products according to, I guess, their risk profile, the benefit it will provide in terms of competition and volumes for imported products into New Zealand. So we will be providing more information once we nail that down, but that's essentially how we envisage the first sort of, I guess, 18 months to 2 years of this pathway.
Amazing. Thank you, Amanda. Arthi has asked, if a Codemark Australia certificate is recognised in New Zealand through a product recognition, does this impact the need for a separate Codemark New Zealand certificate? In other words, is a Codemark certificate still required for the same product if it's certified and recognised?
No, and that's a really good question. And I probably should have mentioned it earlier in my wee chat. So one of the reasons why this pathway has been implemented is to avoid the double handling that New Zealand-based suppliers may have, where you already have a product that's been certified overseas. It's already gone through that process, but in order for it to be a deemed complied product here, you need to apply for Codemark New Zealand certification. So the aim of this pathway is to avoid having to double up and get a further local product certification. So if you have an Australian Codemark certificate, if that product is recognised, then no, you do not need a Codemark New Zealand certification as well. So that takes that part of the process out, and it will be deemed to comply in the same way that a Codemark New Zealand certificate currently is.
Great, thanks for the clarification, Amanda. Mohammed has asked, are SAI global certificates and other certifying authorities considered as proof of compliance if it specifically references the New Zealand building codes? And can BCA still challenge such certificates? How does that interact with our product certificate pathway?
Another great question. So essentially any kind of product certificate or equivalency report, as long as the certification scheme itself meets our criteria and the product itself meets our criteria around our building code performance requirements, then potentially yes, they could be recognised. But as I've mentioned, it's a two-step process. We need to look at the scheme itself, that's issuing the certification, and then evaluating the product itself. But if it meets those conditions, then yes, potentially they can be recognised.
Cool. And Kelly's asked, do products go on a register once they're approved?
Another great question. Yes, we need to make this user friendly. So we're not going to call it a register, but let's just say it's a list. It would probably work very similar to the CodeMark register we currently have on our building performance website. So once products have been recognised, there will be a list of those recognised products with the details of their recognition and any. We haven't quite figured out all the details yet. We may link to the product certificates themselves because the intended use and scope and installation requirements will be really useful. But yes, if you come to our building performance website, once we have gone through our first lot of evaluations, there will be a list of recognised products there.
Great, thanks. And then from Lincoln, what is the fee to get MBIE to certify as product?
Oh, another good question. We are working through this at the moment. So again, one of the main intent of this policy is that if you have a product that's already been certified and gone through that expense and that process to get certified, this pathway removes the additional time and cost to get an additional certification. We don't know yet if we're going to set fees for an application, but even if we did, it would still take out a lot of the cost and time in terms of having to apply for a local CodeMark certification. Again, we will provide more information when we have nailed down those details.
Cool. Thank you, Amanda. I'm going to give you a break now. I'm going to move to some questions about liability and policy. So maybe Suze. Wendy's asked about product warranties for overseas products. Once a product is certified and deemed to comply to be used, who's responsible to cover the warranty bit?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, lots of these products are actually already in New Zealand. So in terms of any product warranty or implied warranty that relates from that doesn't change. So as currently is. So importer, manufacturer, and then also we need to make sure that it's been installed correctly. So the builder is still responsible for making sure the product's installed correctly.
All right, thank you, Suze. And Alan's asked, when processing applications, will accredited organisations working on behalf of BCAs be similarly protected as the BCA when they're recommended to grant an application?
Yeah, so this part is set out. If you're a bit of a legislation nerd, you can go and have a look at set out in section 392 of the Building Act, and that's a whole section that's about when a building consent authority is not liable. And that protection is for the building consent authority itself and for every member, employee or agent of that building consent authority. That's pretty much how that's set out in my understanding, but you'll need to check with your lawyer is that if you're employed and contracted by the BCA to undertake a specific function, then you're acting as an agent of that BCA.
Awesome. Thank you, Suze. Lisa, some questions for you, I think. Tony's asked about enforcement of building product requirements. So some products are imported with little technical information. How are these to be monitored post sort of BPS and also certification implementation?
Oh, we have a team in the building system delivery and assurance that covers off compliance and investigations, but there'll also be a monitoring function there. So we'll have all the tools that we currently have available to us. So that's around building product information requirements and other tools around false and misleading statements about building products. But we'll also have the ability where there are issues with any of the recognitions that we've made, that those can actually be revoked where the situation requires that.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And another Tony, or a different Tony, has asked about local suppliers. So the process for overseas products appears to be more onerous than that required for some New Zealand-based product manufacturers. Will MB also be requiring local New Zealand manufacturers to provide robust compliance information?
Can you just repeat that, please?
Oh. Yes, sure. So it looks like the overseas products is a more onerous pathway, but will MB be requiring local New Zealand manufacturers to provide the same sort of robust compliance information as those that will be importing those products to New Zealand?
Well, the building product information requirements, so for locally based manufacturers of building products, they'll still need to comply with the building product information requirements and Section 14G of the Building Act. So those things are still there.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. So I think that's sort of the end of our questions for now. If we didn't get to your question, we're really sorry, but we will look to provide some feedback to you, and just rest assured that we will be using all of these questions to help inform the work that we are doing. Before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to attend this webinar. Your engagement, questions and feedback are really, really incredibly valuable to us. Please remember that we do still need your input. So your feedback helps shape how these pathways are implemented and ensure that they worked for you in the sector. Just as a reminder, the BPS consultation is open now until Monday, the 23rd of June. And then after that, the updated BPS and acceptable solutions and verification methods will be published in July. For the recognition of overseas product certificates and the minister-endorsed standards pathways, we're currently developing regulations, and these are expected to come into force in September, with the first recognitions published by the end of this year. As part of the overseas product certification pathway, as I mentioned earlier, there are 2 EBOS surveys that are now open. One of those is for designers, builders, and BCAs, and the other is for product suppliers and merchants. These surveys help us to gather insights into how you might use this pathway and the types of products that you're looking to bring into the New Zealand market, and also what you think is important for us to consider as part of it. Your participation in both the consultation and surveys is crucial to ensure the system works for everyone. Ngā mihi nui, thank you again, and you can reach out to us at any time at building@mb.gov.nz, or you can visit the Building Performance website for more information. We really look forward to hearing from you, and thank you again.